She said she needed space. I didn't argue. I just didn't know space was another word for disappearing from my life while I was still paying the bills. My name is Ethan Cole, and I'm 38 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I understood my marriage. I work as a project manager for a logistics company in Chicago, long hours, stable income, nothing glamorous, but enough to build a life people respect from the outside. My wife, Claire, is 36, beautiful in a quiet way, the kind of woman who doesn't need attention, but somehow always gets it. We've been married 9 years, no kids yet, just plans we kept postponing, because life always felt like there was time later. Claire used to say we were building something strong, something slow and real, and I believe her completely. But then she started saying she needed space. At first, it was small things, longer nights at work, less talking at dinner. Her phone always face down like it mattered more than I did. I told myself she was stressed, maybe overwhelmed, maybe just tired of routine. But space turned into distance, and distance turned into something I couldn't ignore anymore. One night she came home late, not drunk, not guilty, just different. She sat at the kitchen table and said the words like she had rehearsed them. I need space, Ethan. No explanation, no emotion, just a sentence that split my life in half. I remember staring at her, waiting for the joke, waiting for something to make sense. But she didn't blink, and in that silence, I realized she had already left, just not physically. That night, I slept on the couch, not because she asked me to, but because I didn't recognize our bedroom anymore. And while she slept upstairs, I kept thinking about something she said weeks ago that I ignored. People don't just leave, Ethan, they prepare first. I didn't understand it then, but I was about to. The next morning she acted normal, coffee, small talk, a kiss on the cheek, like nothing had broken. That was when I started noticing details I had missed before. Her phone always turned away from me. Her passwords changed, and she started smiling at messages she didn't show me. I asked her once who she was texting. She said work, but she said it too fast. And that's when I knew space wasn't the problem. Something else was. I didn't confront her. I didn't yell. I just started watching. And what I found wasn't loud. It was quiet, repetitive, and deliberate. Dinner meetings that didn't exist. Names she never mentioned before. A second life forming right in front of me. Still, I waited because part of me wanted to be wrong. And part of me was afraid of what would happen if I wasn't. Then came the night everything finally cracked. She said she was staying late at work, but her car didn't go to work. It went somewhere else. And I followed. I told myself I was just confirming a feeling. But deep down, I already knew what I was going to see. She parked outside a bar I had never heard her mention. And when I saw her walk in, I stopped breathing for a second. She wasn't alone. And the man beside her wasn't someone I knew. He kissed her cheek like it was routine. And she didn't pull away. That was the moment space stopped meaning distance. It meant replacement. I didn't go in. I didn't cause a scene. I just stood there, watching the life I built get rewritten in real time. And then I left. No shouting. No confrontation. Just silence. But that silence wasn't empty. It was the beginning of something else. Something she didn't see coming. And something I was already preparing for. I wasn't broken. I was awake. And that changes everything. On the drive home, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. Every memory suddenly rearranged itself. Every excuse she gave made sense in a different way now. I realized I hadn't been missing her. I had been missing the version of her I invented. And that version was gone long before tonight. My phone buzzed. She was calling. I didn't answer. It rang again and again. Then came the text. Where are you? I stared at it for a moment longer than I should have. And then I realized something simple. She didn't miss me. She missed control. And I had just taken it away. That was the moment everything changed. Not for her. For me. I drove home slower than I should have. Not because I was lost, but because I finally knew where I was going. And what I would do next. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to understand everything. And then decide what she had already decided for me. The difference was I would be ready. I pulled into my driveway at exactly 2:14 a.m. and saw her car still gone, which meant I had time. Time to think. time to prepare, time she thought she still controlled, but didn't anymore. I sat in my car for a long time, just watching the house. The place we called home didn't feel like it anymore, because home requires honesty, and I had just discovered none of it remained. My phone buzzed again. Another message from her. This time, just a single line. "We need to talk now." I looked at it, and finally I smiled, not because I was happy, but because I was done being surprised. She had already shown me everything I needed to see, and now it was my turn to act. I stepped out of the car and closed the door softly behind me. The night air felt different now, almost like it was watching me too. I wasn't the same man who had left this house a few hours earlier. I walked inside without turning on the lights. The house felt unfamiliar in the dark, like it was holding its breath along with me. I didn't go upstairs. I didn't need to. I already knew she wasn't there. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table and replayed everything I had just seen, not the image itself, but the pattern behind it, the timing, the distance, the rehearsed sentence. I need space. It wasn't a request. It was a decision already made, and I had been the last one to find out. I opened my laptop without really thinking, more out of instinct than plan. Her email was still saved on the browser. So was her calendar, which she once told me we shared for transparency. There were meetings I didn't recognize, names I didn't know, repeated lunch blocks marked as client check-ins. But something stood out. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, there was a gap, no explanation, no location, just blank space. The same word she used on me, space. I leaned back in my chair and stared at it until it stopped looking like a coincidence. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I stopped trusting her explanations. Instead, I started building a timeline. Work hours didn't match. Receipts didn't align. Her stories had small fractures I had ignored because love teaches you to smooth over inconsistencies. But now those inconsistencies looked like instructions. By 3 a.m., I had enough to see a shape forming. Not proof, but direction. And direction was enough. The next morning, she came home at 7:18 like nothing had changed. Hair tied perfectly, makeup subtle, calm expression. She walked into the kitchen and kissed me on the cheek. "You're up early," she said, and I didn't answer right away. I just watched her pour coffee like we were still the same people from a week ago. "Did you sleep at home?" I asked finally. She paused for half a second too long. Of course. That pause told me more than her answer. I nodded like I believed her. Then I said something I didn't plan. "Where were you last night?" She didn't look at me immediately. "Work," she said, then added, "A client dinner ran late." A client dinner that didn't exist on any calendar I had seen. I didn't push. Not yet. Instead, I watched her hands. People lie with words, but their bodies always try to leave the truth somewhere visible. She was calm. Too calm. And calm is often rehearsed. After she left for work, I followed a different plan. I called in sick. First time in 2 years. Then I drove to her office building and sat across the street. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just knew I couldn't stay inside the version of reality she was selling me. At 11:42 a.m., I saw her car leave. She didn't head toward any client location I recognized. She drove north, not toward downtown, not toward meetings, but toward a part of the city she had never once mentioned. I followed at a distance, far enough not to be seen, close enough not to lose her. Traffic blurred around me, but my focus didn't shift. Every turn felt like a paragraph rewriting itself. 20 minutes later, she pulled into a small parking lot behind a row of older buildings. No signage that made sense. No corporate logos. Just brick walls and privacy. She parked and didn't get out immediately. She checked her phone, smiled, then stepped out and walked toward the back entrance of a building like she had done it 100 times before. I stayed in my car, not because I was unsure, because I needed to see the full pattern, not just a moment. 10 minutes passed, then 15, and I realized something that made my chest tighten. This wasn't new for her. This was routine. That realization hit harder than anything else so far, because betrayal is one thing, but repetition means intention. I took a photo of the building, then another of her car. Then I waited, not for answers, but for clarity. When she finally came out, she wasn't alone. The man from the bar walked beside her. Same posture, same familiarity, same ease. They didn't rush. They didn't hide. They just moved like people who didn't expect consequences. And that was the part that broke something inside me. Not the betrayal, the confidence. I watched them talk for a few seconds. She touched his arm briefly, a gesture so casual it hurt more than anything dramatic ever could. Then they separated. She got into her car. He went the opposite direction. I didn't follow him. I followed her, because she was still my legal reality. On the drive back, I didn't feel chaos anymore. I felt structure forming. Pain had shifted into focus. And focus always leads somewhere. By the time I reached home, I knew I couldn't stay passive. I needed information she couldn't control. So I started with the only thing she never thought I would question. Her phone. Not physically, not directly, but through everything around it. Notifications, habits, timing, patterns always leak through behavior. That night, I noticed she never left her phone unattended, not even in the bathroom, not even for a minute. And when she did use it, she angled the screen away from me instinctively, not defensive, protective, like I was the threat to her second life. Around midnight, she went to bed early, said she was exhausted. I waited 20 minutes. Then I quietly checked the living room. Her purse was on the couch, phone inside, unlocked, not because she trusted me, but because she had stopped imagining I would ever question her deeply. That was her first mistake. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I simply observed. Messages, names, fragments, and one thread stood out, not because of what it said, but because of how often it was used. Daily, sometimes hourly, saved under a single initial, M. I didn't open everything. I didn't need to. The pattern was already complete. I closed it exactly as I found it, and sat back in the dark. The person I married was no longer invisible. She had just been compartmentalized. And now I had found a compartment. But discovery wasn't the end. It was the beginning of consequence. And consequences require preparation, not emotion. By the time I returned to bed, she was already asleep, breathing softly, like nothing in the world had shifted. But everything had. I lay next to her, staring at the ceiling, realizing something simple but irreversible. She thought she was managing distance. But what she had actually created was separation. And separation goes both ways. The next morning felt normal in the most disturbing way. That was what made it worse. She woke up before me, showered, got ready, and left a note on the counter saying she had an early meeting. No hesitation. No guilt. No change in rhythm. People only act at normal when they believe nothing has been discovered. I stood in the kitchen, holding that note for a long time. It wasn't what she wrote that mattered. It was what she didn't write. No love you. No warmth. No trace of the version of us she used to perform. Just logistics. That's when I understood something clearly. She wasn't trying to fix us. She was managing me like an inconvenience that still needed basic handling. I threw the note away and made coffee I didn't drink. Instead, I sat at the table and opened everything I had collected so far. Screenshots, photos, time gaps, locations. Individually, they were nothing. Together, they were a map. And that map always leads somewhere real. Around noon, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My old college friend, Marcus. He worked in cybersecurity now, the kind of guy who understood patterns most people ignored. He answered on the third ring. Ethan? Long time. I didn't waste time on greetings. I need a favor, I said. A pause. That tone tells me everything is about to get complicated, Marcus replied. It already is. I explained everything in fragments, carefully, without emotion, just structure. Not because I didn't feel it, because emotion clouds precision. When I finished, there was silence on the line. Then Marcus spoke slower. You're not dealing with random behavior. This is structured concealment. I already knew that, but hearing it confirmed changed something in me. He continued, if there's another person involved, There will be digital overlap, payment trails, location synchronization, even message timing patterns. People think they're hiding things, but they always leave rhythm behind. Rhythm, that word stayed with me after the call ended, because now I had something to look for, not proof. Pattern. That evening, I stopped watching her and started watching everything around her instead. Her routines, her excuses, her timing. She always said she was tired at the same hours. She always became unavailable during the same windows. And always, without exception, her phone activity spiked when she left the house. It wasn't random. It was scheduled life splitting. Two identities running in parallel, and I was only part of one. 2 days later, I found the first crack that couldn't be ignored. A bank alert, not a large transaction. Something small, but inconsistent. A payment labeled consulting fee to a name I didn't recognize. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I tracked it. The account wasn't fully hidden, just separated. A mistake most people make when they believe trust will never turn into investigation. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark and followed the money trail. One payment became three. Three became monthly, then weekly, all flowing toward the same destination. And that destination wasn't just a person. It was a lifestyle, rent payments, dining charges, travel expenses, all quietly sustained by a version of my life I was never shown. By morning, I had enough to understand something irreversible. This wasn't an emotional affair. It was a structured double life. And I was the infrastructure holding one side of it together. When she came home that night, I was already waiting, not angry, not emotional, just aware. She walked in, dropped her bag, and smiled at me like we were still inside the same story. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I replied. She paused. "Something off?" she asked. That question almost made me laugh, because the irony was too clean. "No," I said, "just thinking." She nodded like that was acceptable, then moved past me toward the kitchen. I watched her closely now, not like a husband, like someone observing a system under stress. Every movement had purpose. Every pause had meaning. She wasn't relaxed. She was calibrated. That night, she went to bed early again, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her blind. I was going to confirm everything first. So I did something I had avoided until now. I stopped protecting her privacy. I accessed what I could, legally, structurally, carefully, shared accounts, cloud backups, old sync devices. What I found wasn't just confirmation. It was expansion. There were conversations I had never seen, plans I was never included in, future-oriented messages that had nothing to do with me at all, trips being arranged, a timeline being built, a life being scheduled, without me in it. The strangest part wasn't betrayal anymore. It was organization. She hadn't slipped. She had transitioned. And I had been left in the previous version of her life, like outdated software, still running in the background. That night, Marcus called me back. "You were right," he said. "There's a second identity layer here." I didn't understand at first. "Explain." He exhaled. "Different devices, different usage patterns, different communication clusters. This isn't just cheating. This is compartmentalized living. She's maintaining two completely separate emotional systems. Two systems. One life. And I was only in one. That was when something inside me stopped reacting emotionally and started shifting into planning mode. Because once you see structure, you can predict behavior. And once you can predict behavior, you can control outcome. The next morning, I didn't say anything different. I acted normal. I made breakfast. I asked about her day. I smiled at the right moments. But inside, I wasn't participating anymore. I was documenting and mapping and waiting, because now I understood something critical. She didn't think I was a threat, which meant she had already revealed her entire system to someone she believed would never analyze it. That was her mistake, not the betrayal, the assumption. And assumptions are where everything eventually collapses. By the end of that week, I had everything I needed, not just evidence, but structure. And structure can be dismantled, quietly, precisely, and permanently. I just needed to decide how far I was willing to go. Because once I acted, there was no version of this where we both walked away unchanged. And for the first time since she said she needed space, I realized I wasn't the one who had lost control. That final realization didn't bring relief the way I expected. It brought clarity that felt heavier than emotion, because clarity removes excuses. And once excuses are gone, everything becomes a choice. That morning, I woke up before her again, but this time I didn't wait in the dark wondering what she would say or do. I already knew the pattern. She was consistent in one thing above all else. She believed I was still reacting, not responding. That difference mattered more than anything now. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened a single folder on my laptop. Not everything I had collected, just the cleanest version of it. The version a lawyer would understand in under 5 minutes. Because I wasn't building suspicion anymore. I was building consequence. At 7:41 a.m., she walked into the kitchen fully dressed, hair perfect, voice soft like nothing in the world was wrong. "You're up early," she said. I looked at her for a moment longer than usual. "Yeah," I said. "Couldn't sleep much." She nodded like that was normal, like I was still inside her version of reality. She poured coffee, scrolled her phone, smiled at something I couldn't see. Then she asked the question she always asked when she wanted distance but didn't want accountability. "Are you okay?" I almost answered honestly. Almost. Instead, I said something simple. "I'm starting to understand things better." She paused for half a second, then smiled lightly. "Work stress?" "No," I said. "Not work." That was the first time her expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. A micro shift in posture. A tightening around the eyes. The body always reacts before the story does. She recovered quickly. "I don't know what you mean," she said. And that was the moment I realized something important. She still thought ambiguity protected her. But ambiguity only works when the other person is confused. And I wasn't confused anymore. I finished my coffee, stood up, and grabbed my jacket. "I have a meeting later," I said. She nodded. "Okay." No questions. No concern. Just acceptance. And that told me everything I needed. Because people who are truly innocent try to understand. People who are guilty just try to survive the moment. I left the house and drove straight to Marcus. This time I didn't explain everything again. I just handed him the folder. He flipped through it silently. The longer he read, the more his expression shifted. Finally, he closed it. "This is enough," he said. "You don't need more." I nodded. "I know." He leaned back. "So what's the plan?" That was the question I had been avoiding until now. Because plans change you, not just outcomes. You don't walk away from something like this the same person who walked into it. I looked at him. "I want it clean," I said. "No chaos. No emotional explosion. Just closure." Marcus studied me for a second. "That kind of closure usually doesn't feel clean on the inside," he said. "I know." We spent the next hour structuring everything. Not revenge, not punishment, just alignment between truth and consequence. Legal exposure first, financial separation second, controlled reveal third. Nothing impulsive, nothing emotional, just irreversible clarity. When I left his office, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not peace, direction. That night, I came home earlier than usual. She was already there, sitting on the couch, waiting. That alone told me she sensed something shifting. "You've been different," she said. I stood near the doorway. "Yeah," I said. "I have." She studied me carefully now. Not casually, not distracted, fully focused. "What does that mean?" she asked. I sat down across from her. "It means I stopped guessing." Silence. For the first time, she didn't interrupt it. Then she asked quietly, "About what?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked at her the way I should have looked months ago, not as someone I loved, but as someone I finally understood. Everything, I said. That word landed heavier than I expected. She shifted slightly. "Ethan." "No," I interrupted gently. "Let me finish." She stopped. I continued. "I know about the money. I know about the timelines. I know about the other life you built when you said you needed space." Her face changed, but not into shock, into calculation. That was worse, because shock is emotional. Calculation is survival. You went through my things? She asked, not loudly, carefully, almost rehearsed. I nodded. Yes. She looked away for a moment, then back at me. You don't understand the context. I raised my hand slightly. No, I said. I understand enough. That stopped her, because there was nothing left to explain that would fix it, only things that would justify it. And justification doesn't rebuild trust. It only delays consequences. I stood up. I've already spoken to someone, I said. A lawyer. That was the first real crack. Not panic, not anger, still control, but thinner now. You're overreacting, she said quickly. I shook my head. No, I'm responding. She stood up now, too. This is what you think it is. I looked at her. Then what is it? She hesitated. And in that hesitation, I saw it. Not remorse, not fear, just a search for a version of truth that would still protect her. But none existed anymore. I walked past her and placed a printed folder on the table. Copies. Everything I needed. Already organized. Already irreversible. She didn't open it immediately. She just stared at it. For the first time, silence between us wasn't neutral. It was finalizing. I grabbed my keys. Where are you going? She asked. I paused at the door. Somewhere I don't have to guess anymore, I said. And I left. No shouting followed me. No collapse. Just stillness. And stillness is often louder than chaos when the truth finally lands. The next weeks moved differently. Not faster. Not slower. Just inevitable. Legal communication replaced conversation. Distance replaced routine. The house became a transition space instead of a shared life. And for the first time, I understood something deeply uncomfortable. Ending something built on illusion doesn't feel like winning. It feels like subtraction. But subtraction is necessary before anything real can grow. There was no dramatic confrontation after that. No final argument that changed everything. Just a gradual, structured unraveling of what had already ended long before I admitted it. When everything was finalized months later, there was no victory speech, no emotional release, no cinematic closure moment, just paperwork and silence, and a life that finally belonged to reality instead of interpretation. Claire moved out quietly. No final conversation, just absence where presence used to be. And strangely, that was the most honest version of her I had seen. Because she didn't try to rewrite the ending. She just exited it. Months later, I found myself sitting in the same kitchen where everything started to fracture. But it didn't feel like that anymore. It felt like mine again. Not because it was repaired, but because it was no longer shared with a lie. And that distinction mattered more than anything. I didn't hate her. I didn't forgive her either. Both required emotional weight I no longer carried for her. What I felt instead was simple. Completion. And sometimes that's the only real ending people get. Not closure from someone else, but clarity within yourself that nothing unresolved is left worth carrying forward. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't need space anymore, because I finally had something better. Peace that wasn't negotiated. It was earned.